we said it right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Madison Han, and I am our meeting and events manager here at Doug. So I help run all of our local meetup programs as well as our regional programs. And like I just said, Kim is joining us as well, our new event coordinator. So super happy to have her on board as well. Just here to tell you a little bit about Doug today and help answer any questions you guys might have. Doug is a free community for users, implementers, and resellers of Microsoft business applications. Our main goal is to support Microsoft Dynamics 365, GP, Power Platform, and AI users. We want to be able to give you the tools to excel and grow in your personal and professional careers. We have some rules of engagement. Essentially, all that this is asking is that you keep these meetups solely educational. So please no selling of your personal products or services in the chat or off mute. And we also ask that you stay engaged with your speaker. So come off mute, ask lots of questions. I'm sure that our speaker will let you know how they would prefer questions to be asked, but that's really how you gain the most out of these local meetups is by asking questions and staying engaged. Dynamics User Group has lots of different programs that we offer. We have an online open discussion forum where you can ask questions about a specific product and the community will help answer. We have free webinars year-round. We also have a sponsorship team-up program. We have Doug Meetup program like this one. So we have some virtual, some in person, some hybrid, and you can check out all of them by clicking on or scanning that QR code and going to our website to learn more. We also have some conferences and regionals, which I'll get into in just a second, as well as a YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is where all of our virtual meetups get posted, and you're able to check them out afterwards if you happen to miss a meeting. So great way to see what's going on.
Yeah, we've got a mentorship program as well, right, for everybody in Dynamics
Yes.
and Power Platform.
Yes, we do. We have a mentorship program. Nancie actually helps lead the mentorship program where you can join as either a mentor or a mentee and help people or learn some more things in the Dynamics community. So very exciting. We also have more information on that on our website as well. We have our largest conference of the year, DynamicsCon 2026, coming up May 12th through the 15th. And this is our largest conference of the year. It is almost a week long. We have over 350 speakers, I believe, lots of great educational sessions and networking. So really great way to get involved in the community, meet some new people, see some familiar faces. But we would love to see you there, and it'll be in Las Vegas this year. So if you're interested in attending, you can scan that QR code, and every meetup group actually gets a 15% off discount code. So I'll send that in the chat after I'm done presenting. And then we also have our 2026 DynamicsCon regionals that were recently announced. These are a little bit smaller in scope than our large conferences, but they're bigger than our local meetups, so kind of a happy medium. And we travel all around the world to try and find more affordable and more local groups and events for people to attend. So these are usually free. Some of them are up to $25, but we are going to, well, we just went to Southeast in Tampa, Florida, and then our next one will be in Vancouver, Canada. We're going to the Pacific Northwest. We have our Rocky Mountain in April. That's in Denver, Colorado. We're going to Toronto in June, Africa in July, and Columbus, Ohio in August, Montreal in September, Germany in October, and Texas in November. So a really great way to get involved on a local level and tons of great thank you. Well, I'm glad that you like the city pictures. Really great way to get involved in the local community, and they are a lot more affordable than sometimes going to some of the larger conferences. And we're always looking for new speakers as well. So if you're interested in speaking, you can scan that QR code, and a lot of our call for speakers are already open, specifically for the ones at the beginning of the year. So the first half of the year, those call for speakers are open, and we're always looking for new speakers. So I would encourage everybody to apply. And that is all from me. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer. And I'll also be sending that 15% off discount code in the chat. But with that, I'll pass it back over to Nancie.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Madison, I want to give a shout out to Doug, Dynamics User Group, for helping host Convergence 2025 this past December. It was an awesome event. Will and I were there. In fact, the session we're presenting today, we presented there, and it was really, really good and great to see so many Microsoft people and very veteran senior executive from customers and partners there. So great event.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. And we'll be hosting it again in December of 2026. We just don't have an official date yet, so I was waiting to add it to these slides until we had a date. But it's happening again, same place. It'll be in Miami, probably a different venue, but we'll be in Miami in December. So plan for that in your future, but we're excited to be hosting it again.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. This is the Doug Manager and Admin Meetup. I'm Nancie Calder, and I co-host this with my colleagues Tanya and Vanda. So thank them for helping contribute and run this throughout the year. It's intended for an audience that wants to understand how to implement a whole project, implement a certain part of a project, how to consider ongoing evergreening of a program, how to take in new features, how to just do overall support. So Will and I will be presenting today this concept of Eddie the Seller and the use of Fabric for creating a data estate. But I want you to think about it in terms of how would you design this as your system, and how would you implement it? So we're not doing, Will can go very deep on Fabric. So you could talk to him anytime about that, but we want to sort of talk about it from a conceptual point of view and help you understand where you might use Fabric in a particular use case versus where you might leverage MCP in that use case, and where you might just do MCP. We're going to talk about context and those types of things. So I introduced myself as a Doug Meetup leader. I'm also a senior executive at Avanade, leading our global CRM practice. I'm an MVP as well. Hand it over to you, Will.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the organizing team for putting this together. It's always fun to be on these calls and to just complement the information that Nancie had put together around this session. Given that this is really geared around managers and admins, I think a really helpful lens to look at this information through is, yes, you're going to have AI stuff. Yes, you're going to have data stuff throughout your organization. And we're hoping this kind of presents a decent operating model to think through in terms of how you can govern that in a more centralized way. I'm going to talk more about that as we get later on into the session. But really, as we've presented this session, some of the stuff that I've learned is, it's really about kind of orienting the components so that you know a little bit about everything to know kind of which ones fit with your current ecosystems of technology. So thank you for coming out. These sessions are always super great. I'll just give you a little bit of background about me. So I'm the CEO and founder of Rightway AI Solutions. We're an AI engineering firm that specializes in helping partners and customers of Microsoft in implementing the Microsoft AI stack. So we primarily work with Microsoft Fabric, Foundry, and Copilot Studio. That's kind of how this session was born. Also an author. I've written a couple books now, one with Nancie as well, which was a great experience, and that I believe is published on Amazon on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested. And then I'm also a Copilot Studio MVP. So if you're looking for just some overall guidance about the Microsoft AI stack, I literally live and breathe that. So I'm happy to have that conversation with you at any time. Nancie, you want to add anything here, or?
No, we can just go right to it. I introduced myself. Yeah, go ahead.
Right on. Sounds good. So like I said, I guess the target for this conversation is really gearing you up for understanding how to put the puzzle pieces together as you form your data and AI estate, and particularly around the concept of context engineering. Don't worry if that's not something you've come across before. I'm hoping to explain that in layman's terms so you can understand why that is important when architecting and designing your approach with Fabric, Foundry, and Copilot Studio. And we're going to gear this one around a case study from a colleague that has some painful and common sales and supply chain challenges, and kind of help that bring the story to life in the way that we intend to. So I'm going to start with going through their world today, why the out-of-the-box AI and Copilot stuff is not necessarily working the way that they needed to, how that can be resolved with this approach that we're looking at through Fabric, Foundry, and Copilot Studio. Then talk about some different patternings when it comes to integrating different tool sets, particularly around MCP. And then hopefully we'll have time to go through some of the more adoption focused stuff and implementation. And, sure, ask questions at the end or ask them in the chat. I have a kind of a pet peeve that if you don't understand something in minute 1 and you wait until the very end to get the answer to that question, then you missed all the context of the rest of the session. So feel free to just drop your question in the chat. I have it open, so I'm happy to answer as we go along. With that, I'll hand it over to Nancie to walk us through the seller's current world.
Cool, thank you. So I'm a long-time implementer of CRM, and so I've worked with a lot of salespeople in my day. I know Tanya and Vanda have as well. I also my MVP is in contact center, so I do a lot of work with contact center. I do a lot of work in field service. So this this topic kind of transcends all of that. And I was asked yesterday in a podcast, what do I recommend people do getting into AI based on all of the trends? And it's go big. You've got to look at it from a different perspective than the way we've traditionally done automation. Think about things that, like, it's not just looking at a Power Automate and how do I add a generative AI component to it. It's about end-to-end process redesign. So we're going to talk about the seller, but it could equally be a contact center agent who has a call coming in, and now they need to go and look up a policy, and then they need to go and look up a billing system. And, you're reaching out to all these different components to actually help solve a problem. And in this case, what we're going to do is, who doesn't want more gold? What we want to do is help a seller unlock the meaning of their data so that they can drive more sales. Sellers often complain, and we have adoption issues with CRM because they don't get enough out of it. And that's because they're often spending a lot of time doing administration. So this idea will hopefully help with some of that if it's implemented correctly. So let's talk about Eddie. Eddie is a real life person that I know. He's a sales rep at a plumbing wholesaler. So this probably fits more in a, distribution, supply chain, B2B scenario. He works with lots of contractors who are on site, mechanical firms, fire protection, keeping us all safe in case a building burns down. We need to make sure that we have the products that meet specific engineering specifications. So he's got hundreds of SKUs and price lists and rebate programs and promos. He's got different distributors, different clients, so he's trying to match all of this. And his customers, they want this personalized experience. We've long talked about the 360-degree view of the customer. They don't just want information about price. They want to know that the product's going to be available. And for him, he often tells me, like, they want it here tomorrow, or they want their quote tomorrow. So it's hitting him every day of his life. The generic Copilot really doesn't allow him to span across all of the picture of data that he needs. Let's go to the next one. So Eddie's got several different databases that he has to go to, and he's got different questions that he needs to ask of each of those data sources, and then he has to piece this all together. So let's dig into that a little bit further on the next one. So he's working in Outlook, and he has questions. Even if he uses Copilot to summarize emails, he's not getting everything he needs. There may be links to SharePoint. There's all kinds of, calendar activities that are going on. So he's got to kind of mine data out of Outlook. Then he's got to go to his ERP system. He's looking at orders and inventory, and with that inventory, what's on special order? What, what do we actually have? What do we have purchase orders out there for? When are things coming in? So that's another place he's got to go and sort of put the puzzle pieces together. Then he's got to go and do the same thing in CRM, looking at opportunities, looking at activities. Are they, do they have any cases open? Those types of things. And then what I really encourage you to think about in changing your end-to-end thinking about process is, how do we bring in unstructured documents, PDFs? He's got to go and look up product specifications. Tell me a business rule that we could have written before that would have looked up a product specification when these sheets are changing all the time. Tell me a business rule that we could have had in just policies for returns or knowledge articles, all these different things. We can tie in photos and emails and different bulletins. So we have all this data that hopefully is sitting out in SharePoint, so we have some version control. But how do we put it all together and actually help him get an answer and save him time? Next slide.
I could add one thing. There was an Atlassian study that I looked at a number of years ago when copilots were first coming out, and I'm sure it's probably increased or hopefully decreased, but the average knowledge worker, I think it spends 2.5 hours a day just finding information. And then often they're going and having a conversation with somebody who's like, I don't have time to give you that. And, then they just end up spinning their wheels. So having all of those insights and data points available in one place so that you're not stitching together a bunch of stuff on the fly just saves a lot of headaches overall.
So like I said, it's his everyday problem. He's not getting alerts when something's not, he tells me he gets phone calls at 6 o'clock in the morning from job sites, like, your truck didn't show up, like, and he has no idea that that's happened. If he had something that sent him something the night before, at least he'd be prepared for it. Same thing with back orders, right? Or, he's trying to find, like, this fire protection scenario. It's got to be very particular, 1/4 inch pipe, or, 3/4, it's got to be zinc or whatever. And trying to find that in, hundreds of pages of specifications becomes really challenging. And that leaves this customer thinking he really just doesn't know, because he doesn't, right? So how can Copilot alone help Eddie about the risk of these different types of problems that he faces every day if it's not unified, modeled, and context aware?
So let's kind of break down a little bit more of technologically why that is a problem, right? I'm sure we've all had our experiences with Copilot and just any AI tool being less than sufficient in certain tasks. I know actually this morning I had to give Claude a pat on the back because it was doing so well that it just had to stop at some point. And I was like, you did a great job up till that point. We'll regroup and come back for that one. But I think kind of the main thing we've seen over the last couple of years when it comes to delivering on the promise and value of AI and Copilot is not necessarily that there's, something fundamentally wrong with the tools. It's just that the expectation it doesn't meet reality, usually due to some what I call information asymmetry, where the person who has the expectation versus the person making the tool are on different talking in different languages. And what this manifests as, in early pilots is you have a lot of incomplete answers. I think we've all seen, a chat agent come back with something that's really vague, and it's like, well, I could have figured that out myself. Hallucinations where it's just straight up the wrong answer. And this usually results in low rep adoption. I mean, salespeople in general have a difficult time with adopting tools that require, increasing their education of technology. And so, having something that isn't reliably fitting right into their flow of work can make it very difficult to adopt. And it's not a data platform. And this is often something that I remember, even I think it was one of my first projects. We gave this was pre-Copilot, we gave a chatbot a bunch of knowledge articles, and the stakeholder was like, why isn't it coming back with the right answer? I'm like, well, we didn't give it a knowledge article for it to have that answer. So how it just doesn't just magically come up with an answer. That's actually what causes hallucinations, is that it's being forced to give an answer even though it may not have the right information. So having an actual platform that curates that information so that the copilot is not doing the heavy lifting of figuring out what exact information point you're needing is huge. And you're going to see that a bit more when we get into the demo of the Copilot Studio agent. And as you can probably tell, if you drill into that statement a little bit more, it is really coming down to an underdeveloped, fragmented, context missing data state, because it's not a problem that we've had to solve for before, right? Like most people have BI reports, but they don't have cross data sources BI reports. You know, one of the first projects I ever did with Fabric was, okay, I'm tired of looking at, you know, my IoT data on this screen, my CRM on this screen, and my field service on the other screen. Like I just want all of them in one place, you know, like how difficult can that really be to do? Because that context switching can be a nightmare. And it just is psychologically a difficult thing for us to process as humans. And so a way that I kind of help illustrate what we're talking about with context, because I think that term can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, is I want you to think about this statement. I'm going to overthrow the chair. Are you talking about overthrowing the chair of a board, or are you talking about actually throwing a physical chair? Because I can't tell from reading that statement. It could be one or the other. Or, you know, you blah, I hate you. That sounds completely different to a pickpocketer than to your boss in an email. And so you may be saying the same thing, but you're not saying the same thing. And this is really where a lot of that prompt engineering, intent resolution, all that really comes from, right? Because, you know, we as humans understand that, you know, we can read body language, we can do a bunch of different things to understand some of the other elements to make better inference. A chatbot can't do that. It just knows you put words in, I have words similar in my brain, I'm going to spit out similar words. It doesn't know any of this, right? It does not know the skill of being able to read the room. And that is what creates a lot of inefficient business activity, because there's not continuity between pieces of information, right? This is already where companies struggle, right? Like people getting duplicate emails because the segmentation or personalization wasn't set up properly. You know, how many times have you had a phone call with a customer service center and you talked to 3 different people who did not hear what the last person had a conversation with you about, right? Like I remember before I was going to a conference, and they did a good job. They ended up solving it, but I like had an hour before my flight. I was like, I need my phone to work like ASAP. And the first person I talked to was like, okay, this is out of my realm of expertise. Hand you off to the next person. The first question I get when I get to the next person, what's your problem? I'm like, did you really not even have a slight bit of conversation? And most of the time they're not working in the same place, so how could they? Right? And so that's really where inferability becomes incredibly important. And that's what produces results more often than not in sales and service. And this picture that I have here is from a TV show that I've been watching. And I really like this episode because the guy on the left, he's a politician that's running for an office. And he asks his assistant on the right, I have all these notes of just random facts that I've collected about people. Can you make a catalog out of them for me? She's like, why do you do that? It's like, well, the next time I have a conversation, I want to be able to say like, hey, I know you, like you're a Giants fan. Like Bill is a Giants fan. And I'm going to ask him how they're doing this year, right? That's a natural thing when it comes to just working with humans in general. You want to have that you know, assumed rapport or mutual point of connection. And a lot of the time, you know, sales and service organizations don't have that because they don't have the right information in the right place at the right time. And that really does come down to your data state blocking these AI capabilities, right? We've traditionally looked at SharePoints over here, CRMs over here, ERPs over here, different schemas, different departments, everything's managed, you know, by different areas. And naturally those form silos. You have inconsistent customer keys or product keys. Like, how do I know if you're talking about this version of the product or this version of the product? So there's a lack of cohesiveness. Like Nancie had said earlier on, the unstructured data is often invisible, and that's where a lot of the qualitative information is, and that's also I'd argue more important than quantitative in some regards, right? Like a lot of people focus on building data-driven systems that are all about the quantitative information that they can collect, like feedbacks and surveys, but they're not focused on, okay, I sat with this person for 20 minutes, this is what I learned, right? There's a lot of gaps in that side of it. And because of that, AI doesn't have the full picture, and that makes it very difficult for it to address any kind of data quality, modern modeling, or governance challenges because it's not built for that. And that's something that needs to be done at a more foundational level from the organization's perspective. I'll pause before we jump into the next area. Any thoughts, questions, comments, anything people are unclear of? All right. Feel free to drop it in the chat if something comes to mind. So, I mean, I guess put your hand up or message in the chat. Have people seen Fabric in OneLake? Is that like a foreign thing for most people here? Yeah, okay. I see one hand. That's good. So I'll just table set because I think it's something that even though people have probably come across it, there's some aspects of it that I think are unique that aren't well discussed. So in a nutshell, it is a SaaS for doing ingestion, storage, and modeling of data, as well as doing your business intelligence and AI. You can do data science stuff in there. OneLake, I guess probably one of the better descriptions is that is a single logical data lake for the organization. The way that it's been positioned by Microsoft is it's kind of like OneDrive for all of your data assets. So think about, OneDrive being able to store Excel, PowerPoint, and Word all in one place. That's basically the same concept behind the OneLake. We're piloting Fabric, and several of us took the Fabric Analyst in a Day course. Nice. I think that's a really crucial thing to get started with, and it'll help with what we're presenting within this presentation. And one of the main value props that's super significant about OneLake is that it supports having structured and unstructured information under the same roof. And you'll see a bit more about that when we talk about lakehouses, but that is a crucial difference, right? Like we talked before about SharePoints over here, ERPs over here, CRMs over here. If all of those data items can talk to each other in the same format, that is a significant shift in how data is organized and processed within an organization. And then because Fabric has Microsoft Purview, central governance, security, and access control is all taken care of within there, and it really creates that base that you need in order to have Copilot give you trusted answers, because you can validate. You have one place to go validate. You're not going off and stitching together all the stuff that Eddie or others are struggling with. So let's talk a little bit about the way that you go about implementing that. So for most cases, you're going to have data pipelines and shortcuts because maybe you don't want to copy data from one place to the other. So that's kind of what you would tackle on the ingestion front. There's Dataverse connectors so you can pull in your CRM entities. There's now also ways to link SharePoint and OneDrive and file shares within OneLake so that those can be pointed to within the lakehouse without you having to move over your data. Obviously, the lakehouse can persist and organize it the way that you want. You have, with the warehouse endpoint within the lakehouse, you can do all your T-SQL as well. And so you can kind of use that as your workbench to really get all of your data in order before you go ahead and actually start running some of these Copilot initiatives. So let's have a look at this a little bit through the lens of what Eddie's organization would have to go through to get this set up for him and to support him in his work. So on the CRM side, he's going to need his accounts, his opportunities, items, and sales orders. He's going to need that linked with the information coming from his Business Central environment, which is what we're going to be looking at in this example. But of course, if you have another ERP setup, it would be the same with orders, products, and inventories. And then he's going to need the product specs that we talked about and the customer specs and vendor specs linked from the PDFs. And that's really where, it's not just a bunch of data in one place anymore. It's actual IQ, right? Intelligence living in one centralized location to be able to actually properly go through and answer those sales and supply chain questions. Nancie, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I think we're going to dive into kind of each place and take a look at what Eddie does to set the stage for Will's demo. So we're going to look at what he would have to do today versus what it will look like once Fabric and Copilot on top of Fabric are stood up. So let's dive in. So the scenario we're going to talk about is Eddie gets an email from a customer. Remember, we said he's going to have a bunch of things in Outlook, and he gets it and he has 1 day to turn around the order. So it's high pressure. He's got to find out where he can get these screws, nuts, washers, and bolts, which vendor can actually supply those that he has in his warehouse. They have to be zinc plated. He needs the pricing. He needs to know what's available and how good is the quote. And lastly, he needs to help the client understand if there's any pricing incentives. So we'll talk about that. Let's go to the next one. So where would he start? He would be going into a SharePoint site, and you can see we have a very small version. We have 4 documents, but you can imagine he would have a plethora of documents that he needs to go through. And he would have to go through using enterprise search or opening documents to try to find which vendor actually has product that meets the customer's specification. Then next, once he finds a vendor, he's going to go into his ERP. We have Business Central shown here. He's going to need to go and look up these products and see what the pricing is. Do we have inventory? Are any of them on special order, or is there lead time, right? So he finds 3 of the 4 products are in stock and 1 is on special order. Next, he wants to go and see, are there any pricing incentives that he could take advantage of? And he knows generally that their pricing agreements depend on how much the customer is spending. So he moves over to his CRM to see, what have we actually sold and what have we quoted out? And if we can get that customer to turn those quotes into sales, will that move us into a different pricing tier, right? Because in this case, we sold $167,000 already to this customer, and we've got quotes out there for 172. So that's going to, up their overall total for the year, which might, if we go to the pricing agreement for this customer, again, back in SharePoint, trying to find the most recent one and which one is valid. He does find the most recent one and sees that their spend, if they spend over $250,000 in this year, they're going to be eligible for a 6% rebate. So part of his discussion with the client should be, can we get those other orders closed and get you to a pricing level of 6% rebate? So back to you, Will. Oh, sorry, there's the 6% rebate. This is an example. And of course, you can have Copilot help generate the response, because that's another quick thing. I mean, we see that happening out of the box with all kinds of different Copilots in Microsoft. But again, being able to pull all this information together to create a cohesive email is something we can do. And Will's going to show us in the demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys see how painful that is? Like, I actually could not imagine having to flip through that many things. And that's like, he's getting like what, probably 15, 20 of those, a day roughly. So that's his whole day, is just doing that over and over and over again. And that would drive me bonkers. So let's look at, present, future, whatever context you want to look at it through. Let's look at what he could set up to drastically change that. So if you haven't seen Fabric before I get into anything, this is kind of the interface for it. Normally, you'd see the home screen, you'd have the different experiences that you could look at. Right now, I'm in my lakehouse. So we're going to kick off from the lakehouse. So you can see I've got some tables in here. So I've pulled in my Dynamics CRM tables. So I have my accounts, got my contact stuff and related contact stuff, all of the leads and items. So if there's, particular items that are being stored in my CRM, I can see them in there as well. My opportunities are in here, everything that I need from a CRM perspective. And I can choose that. I don't have to have all of my tables. I can select which ones I actually pull in. In this case, I just wanted to put all of them in there. And then now I've got some of my quotes, my purchase orders, my receipts, some of my stuff coming right out of Business Central. So I've pulled in all of that data as well. And you can see they're all in, this what's called a Delta Parquet. Yeah, Delta Parquet. Well, this is technically Delta. Delta Parquet format. So this means that all of the tables can be read through the same language, basically. So all the CRM tables and all the ERP tables now speak the same language. And then
No pun intended, they're dynamic, right? They're not static information.
Yeah.
It's continuously updated.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thread that we could go down where, you have direct lake reporting, which allows you to basically like update those tables in real time and see that reflected in your reports. But that's a conversation for another day. And then you have your files, right? So we can take all those files and you can connect OneDrive and SharePoint to this. I just put them in here for the sake of simplicity. But you can put all those files in there so they're stored in the same location as well. So now I can see my ERP, my document acknowledgement, and my CRM in one place rather than, before where I'd have to go in, I'd have to open up each individual document, probably do a control F, look through like, okay, are they asking about this product or are they looking for, this item, et cetera. And then I'd have to go into my BC and see what we have in stock, what's available. And then I have to look at their opportunities. So I'd probably be like me and have 4 monitors around me trying to figure out how to stitch this stuff together in real time. So what I can start to do now that I have all that information in one place is fire up what's called a fabric data agent. So if this isn't something that you've seen before, kind of a straightforward, it's like a little out of the box agent builder, much like you would have with something like Copilot Studio Lite. So I'm able to plug in the data that I want. So I think it'll show it in a minute. So first I went through and wrote out the instructions that I want to have. I can write instructions particular to a data source, so I can give different instructions for my ERP as I give for my CRM. And then I can also give it examples of, when I'm asking for this is the kind of, way that I want you to go about querying that information. So for the IT folk, they still have that level of control that they would have if they were doing a lot of the data engineering work just directly through their warehouse or lakehouse experience. And then we have Microsoft Foundry or Azure AI Foundry. And basically here I've hooked up the files to my AI search index. So now I have, all the unstructured information coming into that part of the curated content. So basically the Fabric Data Agent gives me the ability to hook up all my tables to my Copilot. And then in this case, the Foundry agent allows me to connect all my files. So all the spec sheets, the unstructured data. So as of right now, that's how it's set up. I believe in the future that they'll have just Fabric, so you might not need Foundry, in a couple months if they design it right. But I just wanted to make sure that's really clear. And so now, if I look at the email that we were looking at a bit earlier, okay, cool. I can see that they're looking for screws, nuts, washers, and bolts. They've got some specific requirements. They're looking for this information. They want it finalized by last year because that's when we did this demo. But at that time, they wanted it pretty darn quickly. So now we're in Copilot Studio, which is where I'm going to kind of orient all of the backend data and shelling of information that I had done to fit it for Eddie, right? Because Eddie's a seller. He's not going to go into a lakehouse and run T-SQL queries or go into Foundry and provision agents. Like that's not his job, right? That's my job as the AI leader in the organization to pull that stuff together, right? And so now I've done that and I can hook that into this quote builder agent that I've built in Copilot Studio. And I don't believe I'm going to show it in this demo. So just to add some context, since that's the flavor of the month, basically what I did was I took the Fabric Data Agent and the Foundry Agent and I plugged those into this Quote Builder agent. So the Quote Builder agent has nothing else in it. I didn't do any Copilot Studio work. I literally just put my Fabric Data Agent and my Foundry Agent in there and called it a day. And what you'll see in a moment here as I start to ask you questions is how it goes through thinking where to find that information and return the answer. So in this case, the first thing I got to figure out is where can I get that information from, right? Where, according to the documents, like what what vendors actually carry this, so that I can help figure out where I'm sourcing my materials from. So what you see here is because the Fabric data agent is actually an MCP server, it has to spin up and figure out what tools are available. So, if you've never seen MCP servers before, basically when you fire that up, it identifies what skills the agent gets from adding that connector to its library. So it's gone ahead and initialized that. And it's also gone and connected into the Lakehouse agent, the one that has access to the files. So it's basically setting up both of those agents to know where to figure out where that information lives. And now it's come back with a reply. So if I come back up here, you can see, okay, I went in and looked at your Lakehouse documents. So I went and looked at Fabric, then I went and looked at your Azure AI search, and I found one vendor that has that. So rather than me going to Fabric and Foundry rather than me going to my CRM, ERP, SharePoint, and like trying to sort through all of that, it did all of that on my behalf, right? And I mean, 14 seconds is not incredible speed, but it's also not bad. Like, given that it's going off and returning all of this really detailed, context-rich information that I need to properly address my client's concern, that's not bad. So now I'm asking, can you give me some more information? Can you help me find, do they also carry washer products? Do they have bowls? Because I want to, kind of bundle it under one vendor if I can, right? It saves me the effort of having to go off to a bunch of different vendors. In this case, no, they can't. They don't have those available. And again, it went through all of my documentation to find that out. Now I want to know which of these parts met the requirements, right? They talked about the zinc plated versus the stainless steel. So getting very granular with the information that I'm looking for. And you can imagine how hard would it be to find that through, 500 documents, like to actually find the document first and then control F through all of that. It's not going to come back with a nice summary table for you. It's not going to, the manual search of all this wouldn't do the heavy lifting to present the information to you exactly as you requested it, right? So it's gone off and done all that in 15 seconds. So for Eddie, this task of being, an hour of my day on a regular basis is starting to look more like 15 minutes tops to get all this information put together. So now I'm saying, okay, cool. We've got enough information about what we're sourcing. Now we're going to go off and actually look at the data, because what do we have available? What's our inventory like? So now you can see it's gone off and it's looking for that information in my Lakehouse, my tables, which has my my BC data and my CRM data, right? So now it's gone off to look at those tables. Mike asked, where is Eddie asking these questions? So that's actually a really good point. Where I am right now is the testing canvas in Copilot Studio. So this, for Eddie, ideally you would deploy this to something like Microsoft Teams or maybe a portal, whatever you fancy, so that they can go off and ask that themselves. Just because I'm doing testing and I want to illustrate how it goes through the thought process, I'm doing it within the Copilot Studio canvas. So I wouldn't expect Eddie to come in here to do it, but he also has that ability. If he's somewhat tech savvy, it's not rocket science for him to come in and say, okay, I can ask questions to this agent, right?
Since he should live in CRM or Outlook, could we deploy it there too?
I don't know if that's technologically possible today. I think from
Teams
my
is
understanding,
it's okay. Teams is good.
yeah, well, like to
there
just
too.
kind of to exfoliate that, you'd have Dynamics Copilot call your agent, but I'm not exactly sure how you go through the deployment process of that. So probably at some point is the summary of that.
Could I just
So this,
ask as well? Sorry,
Mhm.
before we go much further, because really, I'm drinking it up. But these agents that are feeding into a master agent, so the quote builder agent, these are tailored to the individual. So Eddie and his requirements on his desktop, let's say, and everything he's feeding into and working with from CRM, or has this been scaled for other employees in the organization? Is this a scale of their personal agents that have been tailored to him and his day? Just so I try
Yeah.
and separate
Yeah,
it in my mind.
absolutely. That's an excellent question. So I think the title kind of helps with that, right? Like this agent's designed for quote building. So I think in general, quote building would be done by a sales persona. So it's
Yeah.
not personalized individually to Eddie, it's
To
personalized
Eddie.
at the sales level.
Okay, to the persona. Okay, so the job. It's tailored
Yes.
to the job role. Okay.
Yes. If
It's
it said
fascinating
Eddie's quote
stuff.
builder
Yeah.
agent, that would be different.
True. True. Okay. All right, lovely. Thank you.
For sure. So then, you know, a couple other things that are interesting. I asked, can you give me the unit cost? It rephrased the question for me to fit the context because I just asked for that item. I didn't tell it which one. So that was great. And to kind of finish it off, I'm going into CRM. I'm like, okay, now I want to see, you know, opportunity wise, like what's available there. You know, what as a seller, like what opportunity do I have to, you know, structure a deal for my customer, right? So it's gone off. It's looking at the open opportunities that we have with them. Okay, cool. We have a couple of opportunities. Here's what we've won to date. We've got 167,000 closed, as we saw earlier. And based off of that, so this is really interesting. Let me just jump back a little bit. So now I'm saying, okay, cross-reference the opportunity data with what we saw in the files, right? So what discount do they get based off of purchasing that much thus far, right? So now that information is being cross-referenced. So the opportunity data versus the pricing tier is helping us figure out, okay, right now they're at this annual discount, right? So highly nuanced and granular to what they're looking for. So this is where that stitching kind of dissolves. And then the more fascinating query, which I think will jump on the screen in a sec, this is great. So everything so far, I've been just getting information, right? I haven't really asked it to do any kind of analysis or prediction or do anything really proactive. Now I ask, if the open opportunities are one, what would that take us to in a new pricing agreement? So now I'm asking it to do math. So I'm getting it to take the information that was open, right? So the open opportunities, which in this case was 172.5, what we already have currently. Okay, cool. It did the number part. That's great. More importantly, if all opportunities are won and invoice this year, that pricing discount changes, right? They're going to jump from tier 2 to tier 3, which is the information that would have taken me an hour to find and a lot of mental bandwidth. And so that's fantastic. Now I have an answer that I can take to my client and be like, hey, you know, if this closes or, you know, however the salesperson wants to frame it, I'm good. I've got all that information available to me, the whole conversation transcript. I can take that and run with it. And then as a bonus, I can say, you know, can you write that email for me, right? Now that you've gone through and pulled out all the information, do you want to actually do the email on my behalf, right? Because I mean, maybe Eddie's got an in-person meeting and he needs it sent out, you know, in the next 5 minutes. So what we basically just saw is being able to query all of CRM, all of ERP, or in this case, Business Central, all of SharePoint, OneDrive, and making it available to the business persona so they don't have to go and pull all of that information together on the fly. That's now being handled by, in this case, I guess 3 agents because there's 2 sub-agents and 1 master. But you know, that whole conversation took maybe 10 minutes, and that is saving an abundance of time and brain power. So does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Did this inspire you guys to think about new ways of looking at process automation? Anyone want to discuss that? Cool. You know, because this is just one way of doing it. Will and I do this session as well about, you know, this iceberg and the tip of the iceberg and how far can you automate something and where do you need to have a human in the loop? I mean, you could take this and you could have sort of one super agent that does most of these questionings and really just comes back at the end with the email for Eddie. It just depends on how you want to design the process and what kind of governance you want to put in. And, you know, you have to, and I don't know, Will, if you want to go to, I think some of the next slides are about implementation. We're going to run out of time, but, you know, thinking about how you build trust with this agentic capability is another thing in terms of, you know, trying to get sellers to adopt it or just frontline reps in general, right? Like embedding this in teams, as we talked about, is an important thing. I mean, sellers like to live in those areas and don't necessarily want to go in their CRM. We've long tried to get them to work out of Outlook. So being able to stitch this all together for them, I think we've got some other slides in here. We can share them after, but would love to have a dialogue with anybody about this further. Anybody got comments? Vanda, you usually have something good to say. You want to add something?
Oh, now you put me on the spot. I don't know, it's just getting me thinking about the learning that I'm doing in my role. I work with them, as you know, I work with them customer service and omni-channel. So looking at the way that things could be improved on projects that I'm in. I work in delivery as a business analyst. So it's just really making me think, because it's beyond, it's like a super agent, isn't it? Instead of I haven't worked with agents, like multiple agents feeding into one, like a super agent. So this is now moving it to another level in my understanding or concepts of how we could be using agents. I've sort of seen them as singular, more singular helpers, as it were. But yeah, this is great.
That's one of the trends I was discussing. I mentioned this podcast yesterday, right? I think we're going to see a shift from it just being your conversational assistant to it being, you know, your teammate, your digital teammate. And how do you develop the trust? And but you know, we talk in here too, like, you know, we'll emphasize that a couple of times, like to create this quote to the level of detail that Eddie's client needed could have taken an hour or two. And that's just one scenario. Like we talked about all, you know, lead times. And if we talk about contact center and, you know, you're under the gun trying to interact with somebody live and you know, you need something to help interpret some big long text or, you know, some previous interaction that you've had. Like, you don't want people to have to spend the time to read and synthesize all of it. Now you can have these tools to help there.
Yeah. It's quite powerful, isn't it?
You wanted to add something else?
Well, I'm curious, and you know, feel free to raise your hand, or you know, maybe just something to think about as you walk away from this. What actually would keep your organization from doing this today? Right? Because there is a maturity spectrum to this. I'm not saying that this is something that you can implement overnight. There's definitely multi steps to it, but I have yet to see a good reason why this isn't something worth pursuing from an organizational perspective. Of course, you have to go through the proper guardrail setup and everything like that, but I'd encourage you to think about, and if anybody has comments on that, like what would keep you from doing this today?
License cost,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Mike, you want to add?
Mike.
Time, money, energy,
Yeah.
and expertise.
Yeah. Well, you can build a bunch of agents to do that. Maybe have the agents build this on your behalf.
Yeah,
There's the expertise part.
There's a lot of upskilling that needs to be done up there. And that's why Will and I are doing a lot of these sessions, just to try to inspire people to think about it in a little bit of a different way and inspire them to get some training. Microsoft has some certs that have just come out. So that's interesting. Yeah, do you want to go through this one? You want to take it away, Will?
Yeah, just wanted to wrap things up so that we can get to a cohesive conclusion on this. So, you know, to really pull the whole story together, you know, out of the box stuff is going to struggle with having the ability to read the room and get you the information you need at the point in time that you need that. And that's critical. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or service or finance or whatever, like all of us are facing a paradigm shift in terms of, is this really something worth me putting cognitive effort towards, or can I delegate that off to a machine? That might look like, you know, a bunch of different things, whether it's multiple agents or a copilot or whatever. But that's a question that we're all kind of being asked to investigate within ourselves. And this actually is a decent platform to start putting together an answer to that, right? So we looked at combining ERP and CRM and and documents in one place. I think that opens up so many other cans of worms in terms of capabilities like cross-reference reporting and whatnot. And then having the ability to link all of that together in a cohesive way with an AI solution is kind of like putting a mouthpiece on your entire data estate, which is definitely something that would bring a lot of peace of mind if done effectively. And there's obviously a maturity spectrum. So, I think just being in this room and having a conversation about it is the best place to start. But I'd encourage you to, think about in terms of what would keep you from doing this today. Because this is definitely, as the demo showed, the technology's there and the technology is only going to get better. I know when we did a demo of this in San Diego in March of last year, I had to hack it all together in a Python notebook and it just looked like pseudocode. So the fact that we got from there to by December being able to do this with, a couple of connectors and some natural language, the technology is moving rapidly. So I wouldn't even worry about that. It's really just a question of what's an actionable step that you can take today to start mining that gold out of your data, because AI is just going to read the data. It's not going to know what it means. It doesn't have to know what it means. That's your job. So yeah, that's what I would leave with.
Cool. Well, thank you for being a guest with us
Thank
today,
you.
Will.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always fun presenting this together. We've had lots of feedback. We've done this a number of times. We're going to be at Vibe next week. I don't know if any of you know about that conference, but we'll be presenting this again, and we're having some roundtables to talk about AI from a leadership perspective. How do I, get into AI, and from a technical perspective, how do I get AI into production? Those types of things. So very happy to spend this time with you today. Thank you for choosing us. We appreciate people investing their time in these discussions. So look forward to you next time. Vanna, do we know what the date is for our next one? Sorry to again put you on the spot.
I should know it. Let me just go back one screen and I'll tell you in a nanosecond. Just we do have a February date for sure. I can probably put it in it'll be
Throw it in the
on.
chat when you have it. I mean, we're always
I
looking for
will.
speakers too. I don't know that we've solidified that one yet. We have
26, but let me put it in the chat and then feel free to join us.
Yeah, and get your friends and colleagues to come to these sessions. We have a whole series of YouTube videos from last year. We wrapped up our December with a recap on some of our favorite things from throughout the year. And we don't just bring this AI message to you, we're going to use it ourselves. We're planning to use the transcripts from all of these sessions to help drive a nice consolidated summary at the end of 2026 to share with you. So would be really good for people to come live, but we appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and wish you all have a great day.
Yeah, and I'll be circulating the materials in the next week or so. So you can always jump back and it'll be uploaded, the recording, to YouTube, won't it? So I'll work on that.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Everybody have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Will. Thanks,
Bye
Nancie.
now.
Bye-bye.